What happened to mermaids? One thing that has been on my mind a lot recently and over the past 2 years has been the question, what exactly happened to mermaids? Growing up, I feel like these mythical creatures that owned the sea were a huge part of fantasy, especially fantasy media aimed at a young audience. Ariel in The Little Mermaid, the girls from H2O, or Barbie in multiple movies swam across my screen, through my daydreams, and through make believe in public pools, in bright tails and scaled bikini tops. As I got older, I found them in books and darker fantasy geared towards older audiences like Pirates of the Caribbean or SIREN. But over the years, I've encountered less and less media that includes them. At first, it confused me a bit because to this day, there are still many people who love mermaids and wish for more media surrounding them. A year ago, I even wanted to make a video on how to do them right and why they have so much potential. Looking at mermaids now, my interest in them has significantly declined. So now I want to ask, is that because mermaids are actually a bit boring, or because the media that depicts them fails to understand what makes them so interesting? Let's get into the video. For this video, I will be using the term mermaid a lot. I wanted to quickly say that I'm not referring to any specific folklore character, but rather any character in movie, TV, and literature that can somehow survive underwater and has that typical half woman, half fish body, or can transform into a humanoid fish person. Going back, like I said, the time these creatures piqued my interest the most was when I was a kid. I don't know why though, maybe because as a young girl I was the target audience, or because as a child we have more imagination and can find joy even in very ambiguous concepts such as mermaids. I don't really know. When I say ambiguous, I mean mermaids are really hard to pin down compared to other mythical creatures we see in film or TV. There's no set of ground rules other than that they somehow have to be half fish. Compare that to vampires or werewolves, who also vary in their portrayals but seem to have a more stable archetype. There's not one character or portrayal I look to and say, that's the mermaid. Considering this, the media could make them whatever they need them to be. What makes a good mermaid? I don't know. Especially in stories centered around young women finding themselves, these women being mermaids was seldom the most important thing about them. But that's part of what made them so appealing. Looking at H2O, The Little Mermaid, or Barbie, being a mermaid wasn't everything. It was the bonus. It was an add on that made life more complicated, but also more exciting. It was like girlhood on steroids. Hey, here's this super cool girl who lives this awesome life. Oh, and wait, she can also breathe underwater. It made life feel more magical because it seemed almost plausible that mermaids might really exist, parallel to the life we knew. Especially since so many stories focused on the secret life these mermaids had to live. But aside from the secret mermaid life appealing to young girls, there's an aspect that mermaids add that other fantasy creatures don't, and it's the water. Quoting an article by simplyshannon.scott.com, Mermaids in Film and Culture, water is life, emotion, and mystery, and mermaids, as creatures of the sea, symbolize our deep, sometimes unconscious connection to those forces. In many stories, mermaids are gatekeepers between land and ocean, symbolizing the boundary between the known and unknown, conscious and subconscious. Their dual nature, human and fish, mirrors the complexity inside all of us, blending logic and emotion, earth and water. This makes them endlessly compelling metaphors in storytelling and art, inviting us to explore themes of transformation, healing, and rebirth. No wonder mermaids appear again and again. They're a mirror to our own journeys. Mermaids, at least to me, were an escape. Not just an escape from a boring day to day, but from life itself. Mermaids symbolize a type of freedom I never got to experience as a little girl. Early on, we are shoved into these boxes, especially as girls. Even as a kid, you already see life as the system of rules and borders you shouldn't cross. What does it mean to be nice, pretty, loved? What do you need to do to be kind, smart, and caring? Childhood ends the moment we understand we are girls, the moment we stop seeing the sky and we start seeing a ceiling, a limit. But what if there wasn't one? What if all these rules meant nothing and you could simply escape to another place? Whether that meant an underwater world or just another place on Earth, what if you could be whoever you wanted to be? The world at your fingertips, I remember people criticizing Ariel specifically for giving up life as a mermaid, when now looking back, her story focuses exactly on this idea of escaping a situation that limits you and makes you feel trapped. Just that for her, it was the other way around. She wanted her feet on land. This theme of escaping our world is extremely prevalent in media centered around mermaids, which of course makes sense because, the ocean suddenly being accessible and stuff, but it also explains why Gen Z has a renewed interest in mermaids. No, it isn't. It's escape. Yes, escape into beloved old movies and shows, but mostly escape from the state of our current society. It is a return to wonder and this wish for freedom many young people had to abandon growing up. Mermaids are refreshing. They often appear in stories centered around women. They emphasize the importance of freedom. The idea that anything is possible, a thought that comes naturally to children, has been beaten out of so many of us. If you want to truly believe that, it has to be an active decision. We have to remind ourselves to hope, and these pieces of media make it so much easier to remember what it was like to do that naturally. Mermaids are often picked to portray relatable characters, especially through themes of feeling caged, lacking identity, or a sense of not belonging. They are relatable. Again, they are different from vampires or werewolves or monsters and elves. Referencing specifically media aimed at kids and teens, the mermaid is a placeholder for the viewer. They are the main character, not the love interest, which makes them inherently more relatable, less mysterious, and way harder to write. So let's get into why I think mermaids are so hard to get right that unless you are passionate, writing anything else will just be way easier. If you have ever tried to write anything or play D&D, you will know how hard it can be to make your world building not just fun and whimsical, but also believable and interesting. Quoting an article from Wikipedia, Mermaids in Arts, Entertainment, and Media, the best known example of mermaids in literature is probably Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale The Little Mermaid, first published in 1837. The title character, youngest of the Mermaid King's daughters, falls in love with a human prince and also longs for an eternal soul like humans, despite the shorter lifespan. The two cravings are intertwined. Only by achieving true love will her soul bind with the humans and become everlasting. But the mermaid's fishtail poses an insurmountable obstacle for enticing humans, and the sea witch offers a potion to transform into human form at a price: the mermaid's tongue and beautiful voice. The mermaid endures the excruciating pain of having human legs, and despite her inability to speak, almost succeeds in wedding the prince. But for a twist of fate, the mermaid is doomed unless she stabs the prince with a magic knife on his wedding night. She refuses to harm him and dies the mermaid way, dissolving into sea foam. However, her selflessness has earned her a second chance at salvation, and she's resurrected as an air spirit. Looking at this example, there are so many things that have to be considered in the writing process. Is there an underwater place for the mermaids to inhabit? If so, how do they even live underwater? Do they sleep, eat, spend their day on land, and then sleep in the underwater palace? Is life the same or completely different? Is the water even relevant, like at all? Different from vampires, there is no ground set of rules to reference. How is a mermaid's body built, and is it built to live underwater? Don't know, so that has to be thought about. H2O provides an example where there had to be no underwater place. Many of these questions didn't matter because we are introduced to a set of characters that is human first, mermaid second. There's an established lifestyle, a dam of security made out of school, a home, families, and day jobs. The only time we see the other side of this dam is when the girls want to have some fun time swimming, when they solve mysteries or escape the day to day. They could live fully on land if they wanted to, because there is no life underwater. Barbie or Disney's The Little Mermaid have more ambitious takes on life underwater, although it is more of a mirror to life on land than a fresh take on what society could look like. Many pieces of media leave this part of mermaids fully blank. While they say they're just creating mystery, I find it a lazy excuse for not wanting to solve a complex problem. It's hard to stay interested when every mermaid presented to us just disappears somewhere without any context and appears when it's convenient for the plot. Please just make me take them seriously. This, I think, is extremely underexplored in mainstream media at least. Since mermaids are presented as these hard to pin down creatures, why not profit off of their mystery? They can be so incredibly scary and are wholly underutilized. I read a book as a kid called Lillesang by Nina Blason. It was so insanely scary that to this day, I remember being scared to read it in the dark. I couldn't find an English synopsis, so here's one I translated myself. When Jo and her family inherit an old house on the Danish coast, she's told by her neighbor Bente the story of Gongur, who comes on land to drag people into the sea. Different from her mom, who avoids the water, Jo won't let herself be intimidated by the old woman. But at night, she's lured to the beach by a voice. Bente can save the sleepwalking girl before it's too late. What is the secret behind the siren creature, and why is Jo's mom hiding old pictures with scratched out faces? Jo suspects there's an old family secret. She doesn't expect Bente to be the one who holds the keys to it. If you're an author, I beg, make your big bad a mermaid. It's so sick. Sorry for the detour. Let's get back into analyzing the writing tropes. Aside from making the world building interesting, it also has to make sense. And not just on paper, but on screen as well. Often mermaids lack any sort of depth or dimension and are simply used to add to an already fantastical environment. But the idea of having mermaids in your show or movie isn't enough. The best example are the Peter Pan slop mermaids, who in this movie only exist for some fun visuals and for a little excitement. As a viewer, I was left cold and almost off-put by the mermaids themselves. Don't ever, don't ever show me a mermaid again, actually. It's getting weird. So we need to ask, do the mermaids actually add any significant depth to the story, no matter how small a role they play? Do they expand the world? Do they bring the viewer's interest back, maybe? If they are unnecessary, they can look and feel cheap very quickly. This is probably the reason mermaids are always going to be below vampires, ghouls, werewolves, and demons, because you know the part where they are typically portrayed by women and not as hot male love interests. They are hard to write, hard to work around, and media inherently takes them less seriously because they are mostly female characters for a female audience. The only times fantasy centered around women gets a fair shot is when there is a built-in romance audience, at least since the mid-2010s when vampire and werewolf media took off. Don't get me wrong, I love a romance fantasy crossover as much as the next person, but the moment the magical creatures aren't made to corrupt or save a damsel in distress, the writing of them falls completely flat, at least in modern media. I understand it's hard to get an audience invested without popular tropes and stereotypes, which mermaids don't really fit into. Like I said before, they often represent the viewer. They show up in stories about freedom and liberation from society. So the typical mermaid has no place in, for example, romantasy, where many authors want the main character to be a blank slate. Although they have infinite potential, I feel like writers don't appreciate them. They end up as supporting cast or with a quick cameo. We could get into a conversation about bodies and beauty standards as well with the underwater aspect, but I think I would just ramble because I have a hard time explaining my thoughts on that. First of all, there's so much to be discovered. I love mermaids. I think they are heavily underutilized. The fact that so many of us still look to media surrounding them for a sense of freedom gives them incredible potential. We long for fun, media, and mermaids are just the perfect vessel for emotions like yearning, wanderlust, or feeling trapped. They're incredibly hard to get right though, and for a good reason. The writing is a challenge, and the portrayal an even bigger one.
Tales themselves are very detailed and beautiful, and they were made by a very, very talented crew, which I kind of have to say because they're behind me right now. Each tale is specially handcrafted. The professional sculptors first make a plaster cast of our legs and feet. The tale is then constructed out of waterproof materials, fit with a fin, painted and then scaled by hand. Each tale has over 5,000 plastic scales on it. Because the tails weigh about 40 kilos when wet, we had to be very strong swimmers.
Hi there, I'm Jeffrey Walker. I'm the director of H2O. One of the great things about filming H2O is all the underwater photography. Now, how do we do it? We take a big team, about 30 people. Lots of them are scuba divers. They're underwater with cameras in big housings. There's photographers underwater. There's safety people, stunt people, and our beautiful girls, of course, in mermaid tails.
Colin Buds, another one of our directors, gives us instructions through an underwater loudspeaker, while we concentrate on swimming, acting, and holding our breath at the same time.
And just find the light. Beautiful, that's it.
I personally would rather read more about them or see more animation that can really capture the fantastical element. I do find it important for mermaids not to die out, because they represent the dream. Any young person that feels caged, judged, or like they're not enough can benefit from media that explores these themes of freedom and self acceptance. Be a mermaid, be true to yourself, and live a life that's outside of what society wants you to be. That's what I think of when I think of mermaids. But what do you guys think? Why have mermaids never made the cut? What are they lacking? Or do they have just as much potential as any other fantastical being? And are they just misunderstood? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for sticking around. This is my first video. I know it's not very polished and full of rambling, but if you enjoyed, you're welcome to stick around for the next discussion video. I hope you have a really good day. Bye, guys!